Hi everybody, I am Kenya and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today I have a book review. I finally got around to reading a book called Evicted, written by Mathew Desmond. It was published in 2017. And in this book, the author basically followed 8 different families that lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so in North Milwaukee, there was predominantly black families living there, and then in South Milwaukee there were predominantly white families living there, and he lived in both neighborhoods, and he basically followed the people around in his neighborhoods to get an account of what was going on, their life story. These were very low-income neighborhoods, and I believe he describes himself as an ethnographer. And so he basically told these people that he was doing research for an upcoming book, if he didn't mind if he followed them around to get their stories. And in this book, it tells a story of really poor people living below the poverty line, trying to survive off of government benefits and Social Security checks. And I thought that this was interesting, being that I do work in affordable housing. I work in the corporate offices. I don't necessarily interact with tenants, but I did work at Section 8 for a short period of time. And so this basically gave me some insight on the people who are in those dire situations. I feel like if you are someone who didn't grow up in poverty, this will be a great book to read, just to understand other people. Because I'm going to be honest, when I worked at Section 8, I didn't have a lot of patience. And my supervisor would always say, Kenya, you got to realize the demographic of people that you are working with. They are not like you. They're not ambitious. They didn't have opportunity like you. So you need to give them grace. And I feel like reading this book gave me a different perspective on individuals who basically live below the poverty line and who are in constant struggle and in constant need. So that's just my take. So I'm going to get into a few of the things that caught my attention that I wanted to share with you guys that were in this book. So in one of the chapters, Matthew basically tells a story about one of the tenants that lived in North Milwaukee. And basically the tenant is Lamar. He is a single dad of 2 sons, and he is an army vet. I believe he was in the army, yes. He had a dishonorable discharge. They don't go into why, but Lamar described being in the military as a vacation. He was just living the dream. And so somewhere down the line, Lamar got addicted to drugs or whatever. The mother of his children was also addicted to drugs, and he ended up having to just take his boys and leave her behind. So he's trying to raise 2 sons on a Social Security check, and it's not that big. So he has to pay rent, look after his kids, and it's just a struggle. Okay, so Lamar was also an amputee. He was missing both of his legs, and in the book he tells a story about how he came to be missing his legs. So he went on a bender, a drug bender, crawled into an abandoned building late at night. And now Milwaukee, it's really cold. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, it's up there north. It's really cold. And he woke up, it was freezing. It was so freezing he couldn't feel his legs. He started getting frostbites on his legs. So after 3 days, he had to get out of this house because he was going to die. So he crawled to the window, threw himself out the window. And from reading the book, it seems like he was on the 2nd floor. And so he threw himself out the window. He got rushed to the hospital. By then it was too late. His legs were already frostbitten. And so I feel like the author was trying to paint a picture that people who end up living in the trenches, I call it, I feel like the author was just trying to paint a picture of how people get so low in life, and how they weren't always in that position. Certain things led up to them being in that position that they are in. Anyhow, he also tells another story about another white resident who lived in southern Milwaukee, who had a story where things went downhill from him, and how he was living his life, had a great career, and how he had a downfall. So he painted a picture of, these people don't always start out like this. So you know, that gave me a different perspective. Like, damn, everybody does have a story. In the book, he primarily focused on people who receive public assistance or who live on Social Security. And in northern Milwaukee, he did follow some black families around. He even followed a landlord around. And in the book, he basically said, he mentioned one of the tenants that lived on one of the properties of a landlord that he was following around. And he goes, oh yeah, but she works. But he like glossed over it, but he didn't get into her story. And I think if we're going to talk about the hood and what it's like to live in the hood, we need to talk about all the types of people who live in the hood, because not everybody who lives in the hood are, you know, on public assistance or on Section 8. There are people who work, you know, every day and who live a different lifestyle than maybe their neighbors, because the people he described in his book were like downtrodden. But the lady who he said, oh, but she works, like, well, I want to know about her life. Like, tell us about her life, because if somebody in middle America is reading this, they're only reading about the very, very bad. They don't get to read about, like, okay, the person who lives in the hood who actually works and maybe not, you know, have such a dire story as the rest. You know, he talked about people being on drugs, people growing up in foster care, you know, like those types of people. But I don't know, a little diversify the types of people who live in the hood, because everybody's different. So one of the chapters that really stood out to me was called Hypes for Hire. Okay, meaning like hiring crackheads, shermheads, crack fiends, however you call it, in wherever you live, to do the maintenance work on your property. And I had to stop and read this chapter slowly, because I worked for a landlord in Newark, New Jersey, and he definitely hired Hypes for Hire. Like, his properties were so terrible, like I literally had to stop working with him. Like, they were giving trap house, they were giving slums. And this was like a younger white man who like lived in like New York City, like in a nice high-rise. But these were the properties that he was renting out to people. So this landlord had like a portal where his tenants could put in work orders, maintenance orders, and I would see all of the tenant requests, people complaining, hey, I had a problem with the plumbing, and then like you hired some crackhead to come in here, like I don't have time for that, he didn't do the job right, it's a half job. And even when I worked at Section 8, like tenants would call me complaining, hey, you know, I'm a single mother, I'm home alone, I have these kids, and this random crackhead just showed up to my door saying he had to fix something. Like, I don't want this crackhead in my house. And you know what? I don't blame them. And I don't think that landlords understand. They feel like just because you have Section 8, like that you should be grateful for where you live. But I would definitely not want a crackhead in my house. And a lot of the times you can just pay like a drug addict like $20, $25. Go in there and fix the plumbing. And even when I worked for the landlord, like when I tell you, he bought a house and there was hardwood floors in the house. The upstairs needed to be like sanded and glazed. And when I tell you, these drug addicts did such a piss poor job with this floor job that when I walked upstairs, like my shoes were like sinking into like the glaze. And I'm like, is this dry? Like literally my footprints were in the floor. And they're like, oh, it's fine, you can walk on it. And I'm like, I'm supposed to show this house with the floors like this? And it got to the point where I just couldn't do it. I could not do it. I felt embarrassed showing people some of these properties. So Hypes for Hire, like that's like a thing, like just hiring local drug addicts. Another chapter that was interesting was The Hood is Good. So there was a landlord, her name was Shireen. In the book, like she was very braggadocious about how much money she was making off of renting apartments in the hood. Black woman. He didn't say that she was black, but she was black. Okay, I could just tell that she was black. Okay, by the verbiage. Okay. She owned slums too, and she would basically say, like, her tenants were calling her, oh, the hot water isn't working, the water is off, and she's telling her tenants, oh, I just got back from Jamaica with my man, or you know, my husband, And it's like the tenants are like, we don't care. Like, we're trying to tell us we're trying to tell you we don't have any hot water, the water is off or whatever, and you're telling us about how you just got back from this luxurious vacation in Jamaica. And so in her mind, it's like the hood is good. And I always tell people there's so much money to be made in the hood. Like, if you want to invest in the hood, because the hood isn't going anywhere. People in the hood will always need somewhere to live. But this woman, like, I don't know, she was just very, I don't know, it just didn't sit right with me. So in South Milwaukee, there was a trailer park. Yes, there was a trailer park that the author lived at. And basically there was a Jewish owner, and he basically made money off of the rent that people were basically paying to rent the lot. So say for instance someone bought a trailer and then they couldn't afford the lot rent, they would get evicted, and most of the time they didn't have money to haul the trailer away, so he would just rent it to the next person and charge them lot rent. And a lot of the trailers were just in very bad condition, but people were desperate and they would rent them out, as is, you know. He would put no money into them because technically they were never his trailers in the first place. But if you wanted the trailers, it's up grabs, but you just have to pay the lot rent, if you get what I'm saying. So it's like he didn't really have to put money into fixing up the property per se. His end of the bargain was to keep up like the common areas and to collect the lot rent. So it was like a win-win situation for him. And his trailer park was so bad that like the city had to come in. They basically fined him, and he had to get proper management versus the management he had to run the trailer park. And he ended up selling it in the end. And I believe he inherited the trailer park. It was like, so it was just, all the money was just like profit, you know, that he was making. And so basically Desmond, the author, Mathew Desmond, basically painted a picture of how landlords basically make money. They out here making buku money from poor people, and how poor people are just caught up in the struggle and can't get ahead. And there was one family in North Milwaukee. There were 3 generations living under one roof, and it was just the struggle. So that's just my thoughts on the book Evicted. I thought it was really good. It was a page turner to me. It kept me engaged. It's not a slow read, but you want to get the tea on poor people in America, people living below the poverty line, and what it's like for them. Definitely get your hands on this. If you're going to be working in social services at all, get your hands on this. So these were my thoughts on the book Evicted. I hope that this review will pique your interest to go and pick up the book. And that is all. So I will see you guys in my next YouTube video. Toodles.